Has anyone else noticed that compared to a few of its peers, Premier Protein gets overlooked by pundits far too often? So I'll help you answer that introductory question a bit later in this content, but on November 18th of 2025, BellRing Brands updated the public markets by releasing its fiscal 2025 fourth quarter earnings report that covers the period ending September 30th of 2025. And I'll be utilizing those financial statements along with notes I took while listening to the earnings conference call and any relevant publicly disclosed information to obviously update you on the recent performance of the branded products within the functional CPG portfolio, but also utilize everything as the contextual backdrop for my expanded strategic commentary around convenient nutrition, market dynamics, and trends. But let's officially kick off the content with a quick BellRing Brands financial overview. In the fiscal fourth quarter of 2025, BellRing Brands reported generating net sales of $648.2 million, an increase of 16.6% year over year, which was comprised of a 19.2% volume increase, but was partially offset by a 2.6% decrease in price and product mix. If we're looking at performance sequentially, BellRing Brands net sales increased around 18.4% quarter over quarter. If we examine quarterly net sales by brand, Premier Protein was up 14.9% year over year, driven by strong volume growth. And if we highlight just the Premier Protein RTDs, which is the most impactful commercial aspect within BellRing Brands, quarterly net sales increased by 14.1% year over year, resulting from a similar ratio of strong volume growth and partially offset by decreases in price and product mix. As for Dymatize Nutrition, quarterly net sales increased 32.9% year over year, driven also by strong volume growth, though company leadership noted Dymatize benefited materially by an estimated timing shift in international orders ahead of planned pricing actions in fiscal 2026. But since this is the fiscal fourth quarter, I wanted to also quickly run through the BellRing Brands annual results. In fiscal year 2025, BellRing Brands reported generating net sales of $2.32 billion, an increase of 16.1% year over year, which was comprised of 14.7% volume increase and a 2.2% increase in price and product mix. If you wanted to analyze annual results by brand, Premier Protein would make up 85.9% of the total net sales. In fiscal year 2025, Premier Protein net sales were just shy of $2 billion, which increased 16.8% year over year. Then Dymatize would make up 12.1% of BellRing Brands' total net sales. In fiscal year 2025, Dymatize net sales were $280 million, which increased 13.3% year over year. If we wanted to understand net sales by product format, in fiscal year 2025, RTD shakes were 81.7% and powders were 15.8% of the total. Lastly, while BellRing Brands sells into 90 countries globally, the US market represented 88.1% of total net sales in fiscal year 2025. But let's jump back into some quarterly insights. And as I regularly do within these BellRing Brands content pieces, I want to initially dive deeper into the Premier Protein RTD beverages business activity before examining similar metrics surrounding the protein powders from Premier Protein and Dymatize Nutrition. Throughout the 2020s, the RTD beverage subcategory of convenient nutrition has shown extremely strong growth compared to historical rates. And over the last 13 weeks, for the period ending September 28th of 2025, dollar sales grew 15% year over year, attributed to strong volume growth. Moreover, slightly above 1 in 2 US households now consume RTD protein shakes, and the liquid subcategory of convenient nutrition added something like 5 household penetration points in the past year, the highest increase of any beverage category outside of modern sodas. Also, it's worth mentioning that Premier Protein contributed more than any other categorical brand in household penetration growth. Essentially, RTD protein shakes are thriving because they fit so well within the evolving lifestyles and values of today's consumers. And retailers have seen the category potential and are getting behind it by adding more space for RTD beverages, testing higher traffic aisle locations, and expanding displays in and outside of the aisle, thus accelerating categorical awareness among shoppers. But in terms of retail consumption growth by channel, the largest for Premier Protein RTDs would be wholesale clubs, which was up 23.4% year over year during the quarter. However, don't overlook the brand's other major sales channels, with mass retailers growing 9.4%, grocery up 21.9%, and e-commerce growing 26.6%. Overall, Premier Protein RTD's consumption trends for both tracked and untracked channels were up 20.4% year over year in the fiscal fourth quarter of 2025. Moreover, that strong quarterly performance slightly increased the last 52-week consumption trend to now a 22.4% year-over-year growth rate. And even with that substantial increased year-over-year retail consumption activity, consistent strong levels of production have allowed Premier Protein to retain trade and company inventory levels with that strong stock position, along with increased distribution and product launches, helping Premier Protein end the quarter with total distribution points reaching all-time highs. Furthermore, with retailers de-emphasizing less productive brands and in many cases declining convenient nutrition subcategories, which are weighing on their growth, it provides meaningful opportunity for Premier Protein to further grow TDPs over the near term. But speaking of metrics reaching all-time highs, household penetration for the entire Premier Protein brand now sits at 22% and outpaces the next liquids subcategory of convenient nutrition competitor by several percentage points. This recent growth in household penetration for the brand is being fueled by national TV advertising campaigns and promotional activity restarting, with the latter variable bringing deal-seeking buyers back towards the Premier Protein brand. Premier Protein's market share now sits at 26.4% of total RTD liquids subcategory of convenient nutrition, recently spiking again during another period of wholesale club promotions that extended between August and the middle of September. But with steady production across the full range of flavors, new product launches, and restarted promotional activity, I don't see any reason to believe Premier Protein won't continue seeing its market share settle into a range that consistently reaches new all-time highs throughout the next fiscal year. Next, let's examine the recent BellRing Brands business activity within ready-to-mix protein powders. In a similar range of underlying drivers impacting the liquid subcategory of convenient nutrition has created strong growth within the ready-to-mix powders. In fact, nutritional supplement powders have become mainstream, with category proliferation creating an environment where more consumers are purchasing both everyday and performance nutrition positioned protein products at large retailers. But that statement about protein powders shouldn't suggest I believe the recent pattern of steep retail sales growth trajectory will last forever. Because while I don't mind mixing up a protein shake, it would be silly to overlook the extra friction point for a lot of especially new to the category mainstream consumers, thus causing what I believe will prove to be a lower household penetration ceiling compared to RTD protein beverages. However, in acknowledging that, I also don't think we're anywhere near that point in the commercial cycle just yet, even if ready-to-mix powders growth has slowed slightly compared to earlier this decade. Yet, it's important to recognize the majority of convenient nutrition powder sales volume will continue occurring online, thus applying that same lower household penetration ceiling wouldn't necessarily apply within a multi-channel retail environment. But with BellRing Brands positioned strongly across both performance and everyday consumer segments of ready-to-mix powders subcategory of convenient nutrition, it benefits twice from this marketplace tailwind. Though let's stick with the Premier Protein theme and initially analyze the business activity of their protein powder SKUs. And while a much smaller contributor to its overall commercial results, protein powders continue to perform strongly for Premier Protein, with quarterly retail takeaway growth increasing slightly below 17% year over year. But due to what I assume is ongoing SKU rationalization at Premier Protein, discontinued products created headwinds for sales channels like mass and grocery, with quarterly retail takeaway declining around 10% and 1% respectively. Alternatively, Premier Protein powders recently gained full distribution at Costco and currently has the highest velocity across all whey protein powders in this key customer. So despite the choppy quarterly retail takeaway results, BellRing Brands leadership has reiterated their excitement about the opportunity emerging with Premier Protein powder SKUs, as they have proven to be both incremental to RTD protein beverage sales and beneficial towards growing the brand's household penetration. And believe it or not, Premier Protein powders have already surpassed the household penetration of Dymatize. Conversely, if we're being fair to Dymatize, that's not a like-for-like comparison because Premier Protein is a much more well-known convenient nutrition brand overall that's more recently extended formats. On the other hand, the Dymatize brand is a lot narrower, focusing on the more sophisticated performance nutrition consumer that makes up about half of all protein powder dollar sales at large retailers. But maybe this is a good time to transition into analyzing the recent market activity involving Dymatize. As mentioned earlier, categorical growth over the last handful of years within large retail channels has also greatly benefited those performance nutrition brands like Dymatize that were aligned from a sales channel strategy perspective. And this has helped Dymatize become the number 4 brand in protein powders overall and second largest market share leader in the performance nutrition segment. Nevertheless, it would be hard to overlook that retail takeaway trends have been sliding throughout the last probably 12 to 18 months as Dymatize faces a much higher level and diversity of competitive threats across all sales channels. And just to expand on that commentary a bit more, it's no secret that the Great Shutdown shifted categorical shopping behaviors that benefited e-commerce, wholesale clubs, grocery stores, and mass retailers. But even if that event happened only 5 years ago, performance nutrition powders stocked at these large retailers during that time frame was much smaller in merchandising scope and extent. So the sales channel strategy decisions made by Dymatize during the mid to late 2010s perfectly positioned the brand as a primary beneficiary of this shifted categorical shopping behavior. But what's happening now is that every challenger brand that was either too weak or poorly positioned during the Great Shutdown impacted timeframe has followed many of the previous Dymatize sales channel strategies. Moreover, these challenger brands possess brand distinctiveness and emotionally connect with today's digital-first audiences. Alternatively, a mixture of value-oriented shopping behavior, 2 cycles of commodity price inflation in the last probably 3 to 4 years, and consumption growth in protein powders has led retailers to prioritize private label creations within the category. And while BellRing Brands will say that Dymatize is a premium brand, thus not competitive with private label, company leadership is overestimating the power of this relatively bland legacy performance nutrition brand. But even with the shifting competitive and business landscape, excluding the wholesale club distribution loss, Dymatize experienced quarterly retail takeaway growth. Additionally, continuing marketplace tailwinds, such as performance protein powders becoming more mainstream and overall category proliferation, helped Dymatize essentially sustain its total distribution points and ACV percentage. Yet, I'm not sure that setup helps lessen the worries around what it might take strategically to get Dymatize back into consistent growth mode. So in response, BellRing Brands has attempted to invest further into Dymatize brand marketing and restart product innovation, though I'd say neither effort has resulted in meaningful success yet. And BellRing Brands leadership noted reducing brand investment in fiscal year 2026 as it attempts to offset meaningful input cost inflation. And that transitions perfectly into an operational update, as it has been a volatile area over the years for BellRing Brands, stemming from both supply constraints and elevated dairy market pricing. In terms of the overcoming RTD beverage supply volatility, BellRing Brands has been successfully executing on a multi-year Premier Protein plan, partnering with the biggest and most reputable players in the industry to make large CapEx investments, which now has given them a scalable, regionally diverse supply chain that should enable many years of robust growth. Then, regarding input cost inflation, the quarterly gross profit margin was 28.9% of net sales, which declined 800 basis points year over year and fell 650 basis points sequentially. Though, if we zoom out, annualized negative gross margin impact was much lower. And for those wondering, dairy proteins represent almost 40% of the total BellRing Brands cost of goods sold, but currently BellRing Brands is dealing with a double whammy of input cost inflation, as elevated high-end whey protein market pricing is an obvious cost driver, but the company also purchases dairy proteins from other markets like New Zealand and Europe, currently impacted by import tariffs. So cost inflation mitigation efforts at BellRing Brands are obviously happening, especially as it also contends with increased promotional activity and packaging redesign costs negatively impacting gross margins. And then for the final part of this content, I want to help you make sense of what I was referring to within my introduction. While pundits clamor over recent energy drink market dynamics and trends, most of those same experts totally overlook that retail sales of RTD protein shakes have doubled since 2019 to $8.7 billion. Similarly, despite it being the category leader in market share, household penetration, and repeat purchasing, you'd struggle to see many so-called knowledgeable CPG folks talking about Premier Protein. But instead of harping on that point and somehow making this about my consistently accurate decade-long track record of market predictions, I'd like to examine the product development variable that's defining this next phase of RTD protein shakes. And as noted earlier, Premier Protein has essentially a quarter of the market, and the other quarter share is held by the two RTD protein beverages owned by the Coca-Cola Company. And from a product development standpoint, in many ways, these are different products. This might be the wrong technical term, but Premier Protein is a protein powder emulsion beverage, which has a comparatively thicker, higher viscosity fluid, and generally the consumption experience reminds you of drinking a healthy milkshake. Then Fairlife or Core Power is primarily ultra-filtered milk, which is thinner, and generally the consumption experience reminds you of drinking a typical beverage. So who, or I guess technically which product approach wins? BellRing Brands seems to believe this is normal segmentation within a mature growth beverage category and not much interaction, essentially, different consumer, different occasion. But think about it this way. How many typical beverages versus milkshakes do you consume annually? I'm sure we'd all like to drink more actual milkshakes, but arguably that desirable result would be achieved more through increased frequency of current occasions compared to expanding occasions. Regardless, I don't think there's a definitive answer to this question just yet, despite Fairlife or Core Power retail sales growth outpacing Premier Protein and the gap closing quickly across a collection of other commercial metrics. While the competitive landscape is filled with declining legacy, newer insurgent and crossover brands, it will continue as mainly a marketplace duopoly for some time, as it will take many years to replicate the manufacturing capacity, supply chain, product expertise, brand equity, and retailer relationships of Premier Protein and Fairlife Core Power. But I hope you enjoyed the first principles thinking that went into my latest YouTube video. If you did, can you do me a favor by hitting that like button? That quick and free action helps YouTube know my content is worth spreading to more people. Also, we're getting really close to reaching my next subscriber goal, and it would be great if you join me on this journey. But to do that, we need to fix the fact that slightly more than 3/4 of you that are watching this video right now are not subscribed to my YouTube channel, and that hurts my feelings. Regardless, I want to thank you for giving me some of your attention and time, and I'll see you on the next one.